start and stop today. Oh my goodness. Hope you're well. Hope everything is well. Yes, it's been a while since I posted, but it's because I've been doing a lot of research for you. First of all, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you for all your likes and your comments. I really was impressed that you decided to actually like my political analysis. So today, let's do a little bit of a financial economic analysis on our situation regarding the debt in Kenya. This might actually apply to Africans in other countries because many African countries are kind of caught in this debt trap. And it's really a trap because it's a way to keep us enslaved, you know, to systems that do not help us as a country. I think it's important for the citizenry to get up and say no to debt. Because what happens is that it's like 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. So it's very difficult to get ahead when you're in debt. Very difficult. Yeah. So this time I want us to talk about 2 main issues that are affecting our country in Kenya. I know I have been a staunch follower of Jimmy Wanjigi. Jimmy Wanjigi is a businessman in Kenya. He has been featured by a program called Spice FM. So basically they bring him on and, you know, he's always bringing us bombshell after bombshell, you know, of revelations. Because what he did is that he actually conducted his own forensic audit, going back 10 years in our history to find out where are we, where do we situate. So let's get to the real thing. I kind of tried to summarize this information into some sort of tables to make it easier for me because I'm trying to what you call kiss the information. When I was working in the US for a research organization, I learned a term called KISS, K-I-S-S. It means keep it simple, stupid. It's not to insult anybody, but it's to say that no matter how uninformed or unaware you are about data, statistics, information, try to simplify it so that people understand it. I think when Jimmy Wanjigi comes in there with all his documentation and he only has about 45 minutes to tell us everything he has learned over the past 1 year, maybe, or 6 months of research, it's difficult for him to condense it, to make it consumable by some of us who are not economists and some of us who are not statisticians. There are 2 types of loans that Kenya is literally grappling in the hands of, like literally, you know, our necks, you know, are being strangled by 2 major loans, types of loans that the government took. The first one is the standard gauge railway, which is actually our railway from Mombasa to Nairobi, which was eventually extended to Naivasha. Okay, and then the second one is Euro bonds. Okay, Euro bonds. So let's take it one by one. So we have the SGR, and all this information literally is in all these videos. It's from Jimmy Wanjigi. I'm not trying to say that I made it up. I did not. I just listened very carefully and tried to simplify it and thought to myself, let me do a little bit of an unpacking. Yeah, let's unpack this information a little bit. What did Jimmy Wanjigi tell us here? He told us Kenya had signed 2 contracts with the government of China in 2012 during the Kibaki area. Okay, President Mwai Kibaki, during Kibaki's area. Actually, he's coming to the end of his term at that point. So he took a contract for what you call civil works, construction of the SGR, which is the standard gauge railway, the railway, from Mombasa to Nairobi. Okay, we're trying to increase our efficiency in terms of transportation and also our costs, hoping that business costs are going to come down when we have a better mode of transportation rather than the roads. So we took a contract, number 1, which was for civil works and construction of the SGR. I think that's pretty straightforward, okay? That particular contract was taken in June 2012 and for the value of $2.2 billion. Yeah, we're going to be talking billions and trillions, guys. So we took it for $2.2 billion for what? For civil works. At the same time, we also took, during the same year, in October, we took another contract, or we signed another contract for the same SGR, but this time not for the civil works, but for the installation of the facilities. What facilities are these? These facilities include the railway docking stations, okay, the locomotives. The locomotives are literally, you know, the cars, and the rolling stocks. I believe is everything that rolls, you know, the wheels and all that stuff, yeah? This is still Nairobi, Mombasa, okay? Nairobi, Mombasa. So this was on 4th October. Remember the first civil works we took in June. Then the second contract was signed in October, same year, 2012. And between Kenya Railways, okay, because we have Kenya Railways, and the China Road, Bridge, Airport and Airports Corporation. Let's call it CRBC, okay? So Kenya Railways, Kenya Railways, and CRBC, which is the China Road and Bridge Corporation, okay? So this is a company that was going to come and build us the railways, okay, and supply us with all the locomotives. The finance agreement was actually signed the following year, 1st August 2013. Now we have a new government in place. We have the Uhuru and Ruto government, the Jubilee government. The financing agreement was between the government of Kenya, represented by the National Treasury, and the Republic of China, represented by the Export-Import Bank of China. Okay? So China was represented by their bank, Export-Import Bank, okay? And Kenya was represented by the Treasury. So the agreement was signed 1st August 2013, like about a year later from the time that people had agreed on this whole thing. And the total that was agreed upon was a bit higher than, because they had to take into consideration what they call non-binding bill of quantities. The non-binding bill of quantities is basically the variation in costs of assets. So we know that the costs are not fixed. So for example, you can come up with a budget. You can come up with a budget for building your house, let's say a year before. But the year later, you find maybe because of changes in exchange rate or maybe the changes in the taxation and things like that, yeah, things become more expensive. But you need to also understand another thing, that this particular contract was exclusive of the VAT, value added tax. It was also exclusive of the customs duties, IDF fees, and what else? The withholding tax and the cess. So basically this was a tax-free agreement, a tax-free kind of loan agreement. Signed in, when, do you remember? August 2013. Yeah, this is when the financing agreement came to life. So, you see, the railway was built during the time of Uhuru Kenyatta. Although the process was started during the Kibaki era, this whole thing, it all came to life during the Uhuru and Ruto regime. All right, now, Kenya, okay, as a sovereign state, also has to contribute. We can't take 100% loan from people. We have to also contribute. So, Kenya was to raise the difference between the total financed by China and the total cost of the project. Yes. So the total project was going to cost approximately $5 billion, literally. So China advanced Kenya $5 billion, yeah, and actually paid it all. I don't know why. Where are my keys? Oh, there are my keys. Yeah, I need to shut the window. Although I'm going to get very hot, I need to shut these windows because this person here is making a lot of noise. One of the things that I found with the Jimmy Wanjigi and the Spice FM interview is that there was a mix between dollars and shillings, and this caused a lot of confusion for a lot of us. So I think, I was also trying to extrapolate the information, extrapolate the data. It's not difficult, but the problem is that if you move between different currencies, it becomes very complicated. Yeah.
Signatories?
The signatories done at Beijing on this 19th day of August.
This was during President Uhuru's first visit to China.
Yes, August 2013. Mr. Henry Rotich, Cabinet Secretary, National Treasury of the Republic of Kenya.
Okay.
Signature. Then Mr. San Ping, Vice President of the Export-Import Bank of China, on behalf of the Export-Import Bank of China.
All right.
Those are the signatories.
Okay. So Treasury and Exim Bank China have entered into a financing agreement.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, further to this agreement, in it says that 3.8 is 90% of the project cost. So that the Kenya government is to raise 10%, what they call self-raising finance, right, as its contribution.
Yeah,
so the Kenya government should have raised 3.8. Yes.
3.8 billion. It's
because we're going at 100 shillings per dollar.
Correct.
Right? At that point.
Correct.
So you're looking at about 380 billion.
We extrapolated that, right? Because in our books, the debt to China Exim Bank is $5 billion. An extension of 1.2 to this going to duka moja. Sio Kimau, duka moja. All right?
Okay.
So the total to duka moja is $5 billion. That's the loan we took from China Exim Bank.
Okay.
All right? Are we on the same page?
So far.
Mombasa
Right.
too. Yeah.
So of that $5 billion, right, we've taken the exchange rate over the period, right, and calculated, right, that total cost, right, as 475 billion shillings.
Okay.
All right, so like the 380, and then you go to Dongakundu, to Dukamoja,
Yeah.
you have 474 billion shillings.
Okay.
Right? So the entire rail city from Mombasa all the way to Dukamoja, okay, is just under 500 billion shillings. China Exim Bank, according to the debt book, did advance us $5 billion,
Okay.
which was 90%.
The debt book is at CBK.
Yes. And it's also tabulated as an item in the budget. So they advanced us $5 billion, which was 90% of the construction of the rail from Mombasa to Dukamoja, Naivasha.
Okay.
All right? Are we on the same page?
I was on
Yeah.
the same page, but
Right.
I'm going to have to ask, did this money find itself in the consolidated fund?
Yes.
Okay.
It landed.
This one landed.
So then what happened is that the cost obviously went up by another 1.2 billion from 3.8 billion. So it came to 5 billion. That's how we arrived at $5 billion, or just under about 500 billion shillings. Yeah? All right. So what happened then is that China advanced Kenya the entire $5 billion, okay, which represents again 90% of the construction of the rail to Dukamoja. Dukamoja is in Naivasha, okay? So the debt book of the Central Bank of Kenya established it as an item in the budget, all right? So this was done very formally, properly, very formally, no issues at all. So in the consolidated fund, which is actually the National Exchequer account, the National Consolidation Fund is actually just an account for the Kenyan government. That's where they actually make their payments, and that's where they receive their loans and their grants and monies. It's called the Consolidated Fund. Another word for it is called the Exchequer account. Just depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from banking or if you're just like me, yeah. Me, I like calling it the Consolidated Fund because it consolidates all the money from different places. So basically, in the Consolidated Fund, Kenya Railways forwarded certificates of payment to Treasury. So what happens is, Kenya Railways, remember this was an agreement between Kenya Railways and the Chinese corporation, okay, that was going to be building the railway. So in the Consolidated Fund, Kenya Railways would forward certificates of payment to Treasury. Treasury would then pay 10%. What we call the self-raising finance, okay? That's the balance of payment that we're supposed to be paying, okay? They call it the self-raising finance. Sounds like self-raising flour to some of us women. So we're also raising money, guys. We are raising money. We're not just begging. We're doing this together in partnership, okay? So we're partnering, and the Bank of China is helping us, okay? Yeah. So basically what happens is that the Treasury then pays 10% of the self-raising finance, 10% of the finance, to the China Export-Import Bank, Exim Bank, EXIM Bank, okay? So the Treasury of Kenya pays 10% of whatever has been completed to the China Exim Bank. The China Exim Bank issues its payments to the China Road and Construction Company. That's where we get confused now in terms of what is the process, because we're not part of the process and I can't be 100% sure. All I know is that there are various players. There's the Kenya Railways, there's a Chinese contracting company, there's the bank, okay, and there's also the Treasury. Yeah. So the China Exim Bank would pay China Road and Bridge Construction in full. So Kenya has been paying the loan already and we've already started paying off the principal. Okay, through notices of what they call drawdown. So, do you understand that we have actually paid the interest already, and that now we're actually paying principal? So, according to Jimmy Wanjigi, who conducted a forensic audit, money granted by the Treasury to Kenya Railways for the project in Kenya shillings was valued at 475 billion shillings. The total value of the rail line to Naivasha. So Kenya paid 47.5 billion shillings, which is about 10%. Let's say the exchange rate would be maybe 100 shillings to the dollar. Yeah, make it a bit easier for us. Yeah, a bit more than 100 shillings to the dollar then at that time. So Kenya was going to have to pay about, if it's let's say for example the whole total cost comes to $5 million, then in that case the Kenya is going to pay what? 500 billion shillings, yeah? But we're paying 475 billion shillings, to be specific. To his findings, the bone of contention is that Kenya paid much more than they were supposed to pay. He did the mathematics and discovered that instead of Kenya paying 475 billion, so they found that actually when they did the tabulations, Kenya had paid much more. Much more. So Kenya had paid 644 billion shillings already to Axiom Bank. So there was an overpayment, like a double payment, yeah, more than double. Because remember, we have a loan that we are repaying, okay, of 475 billion, isn't it? Plus the 10% that we also contributed. Has the claims and certificates of payments totaling 1.2 trillion. A project that was supposed to cost 475 billion ended up costing 1.2 trillion because Kenya decided to double pay. Kenya paid through different departments of the Treasury. Jimmy Wanjigi cited that different departments of the Treasury were doing different things. We were supposed to pay, according to Jimmy Wanjigi, we were supposed to have paid 47.5 billion shillings, but we ended up paying 644 billion shillings. According to the books of the National Treasury, Exim Bank paid China Road 500 billion shillings about. That should have been a 90% contribution. So we ended up paying 500 billion plus 6.44 billion, which would come to approximately 1.2 trillion shillings. Yeah. So, but he feels that conservatively over 700 billion shillings has been put in somebody's pocket because, unfortunately, that money cannot be traced. Nobody can trace that money. Nobody knows where that money went. So what he feels is that the money was washed because the money was paid to the Axiom Bank, but China apparently came back, okay, and said that they were going to actually build like a token, like a project, which was only going to cost like 100 billion shillings. Imagine you've already put away extra 700 billion, then you bring back 100 billion to actually build the expressway that everybody loves. Was 100 billion shillings. 100 billion shillings. So you bring that 100 billion shillings back as some sort of token. So you're 1.2 trillion shillings in debt. You see, we're moving between billions and billions of shillings and billions of dollars. Yeah. So in total, anyway, we have paid 1.2 trillion shillings. So we should have another railway line. We should. Yeah. Or another very, very, very big project. Yeah. So this is the problem now that we're having now, because that money cannot be traced. We're always asking ourselves, why is the shilling dropping? Why is our money going? Apparently it's because we've already paid off our railway line, but we are still being charged for it because we still have to pay for that extra 700 billion. Who knows where it came from? 600 and something billion. Who knows where it came from? Where it is? Where's that money? Okay, and that's what he's calling the odious debt. Fake debt. Fake debt. Meanwhile, businesses are struggling to even just take loans. We have paid 644 billion for a contract of 475 billion. If we do not address this massive theft, no amount of taxes or stabilization will help us.
475 billion.
10% is
47.5 billion.
Right. So we look for the 47.5 billion. And sure enough, before Treasury issued its notice of drawdown, it had to give evidence that it had paid the 10% self-raising finance.
Right.
Yeah.
So we just calculated. Okay?
Okay.
And do you know what that amount got to?
47.5 plus.
No, unfortunately
75.
not. Unfortunately not.
It's less.
This one I want you to read. This is the amount of our 10% contribution.
Yeah, okay. 644 billion shillings.
Yes.
644 billion.
That's a contribution.
That's our 10%
That's the
contribution.
10%, which should have been 47.5 billion shillings.
We paid how much?
644 billion shillings. It was received by KRC, transferred to CRBC.
Okay.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
And those are in our books.
Yes,
Okay.
in plain sight.
How do we explain
And
this?
I have all the documents. All the transfers, everything. All the documents.
644, not 64.4.
No, 644 billion.
As opposed to
47.5.
47.5 billion.
We were supposed to save to send 47.5.
47.5, but ended up sending.
in,
644.
given our reputation for enormous generosity, we
decided to
decided to
send
give
10 times the
600
amount.
and how much again?
644 billion.
Okay.
Okay, Jimmy. With each certificate issued by China Road, right, and the corresponding payments, were you seeing a 10% correlation?
All they do, and you know, this is what I'm saying.
Because
I think if you want to talk about a crime site, it is called the Treasury. What you see is one simple line: self-raising finance for SGR construction. They don't even put. It's not called 10%.
Okay.
It's just called self-raising
Raising finance, SGR construction.
SGR construction.
Now, in your audit,
Yes.
you should be seeing. So when they're issuing a certificate, the amount of money that China Road receives from Exim should correspond 10% with the amount of money that Treasury
According
has
to who?
released to Uni.
According to who?
According to the
You see,
contract.
what you need
everything
to
you're
understand.
explaining.
What you need to understand is that they seem like they are different departments in the Treasury. There's one that is doing the drawdown for the loan,
Okay.
right? Saying, "Oh, I've received the certificate. Issue Exim Bank with the drawdown."
Yes.
And there is another that is paying the grant from Treasury
To Kenya Railways.
as 10% contribution, so-called self-raising finance for contribution.
And what's Kenya Railways
And-
supposed to have done with this money?
Now, what they
to
did,
CRBCC.
and it's also very well recorded, they paid China Road and Bridge.
So the money they receive.
So China Road and Bridge received a total of 1.18 trillion shillings.
I'm confused.
644
Plus.
plus the $5 billion.
Right. That's amount the 644, Jimmy. I get it.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, what happened is that we ended up paying 644 billion. Okay. This was the confusion. If you listen to the discussion, you'll hear Jimmy Wanjigi moving between US dollars and Kenya shillings, and this is what was really confusing Kenyans so badly that even professionals could not understand him. But I think I understand him. Very noisy place where I was, and I'm back home now. Hopefully it's going to be a bit better, okay? Let's see. Hopefully. Still a little bit of noise, but I hope you're going to tolerate. So, what is the issue? I've been looking at the data again. I have had some chance to look at this data again because it can be very confusing for anybody anyway, yeah? So basically what happened is that the labeled self-raising finance, which is the 10%, was coming to 47.5 billion shillings, the 10%. But don't forget, we still have to pay 90% over a period of time, yeah? It's not free money. There's no free lunch. So we still have to pay the 475 billion shillings, okay? So, eventually we have to still pay it off. Plus, already Kenya had already paid. As we are paying this loan, Kenya has already paid 644 billion shillings, okay? and transferred to the China Roads and Bridge Corporation. Okay? So that is what Kenya paid. Kenya actually paid 600 and somebody didn't understand somewhere that Kenya was only supposed to pay 10% and then take some time and pay the balance, okay, of that 475 billion shillings. Somebody decided, okay, so we are supposed to pay 475 billion. Wacha tuwaonyeshe sisi tunaweza, man. Hata tutawalipa even more, 644 billion shillings. So you see, guys, this is an irregularity. I'm just making a joke of it, but it's not funny. It's an irregularity. Why are you paying 644 billion? And then at the same time also taking a loan of 475 billion? Does that make any sense to anybody? No, it does not. Yes. So basically, this is his bone of contention. This is what you say. Bone of contention means this is the problem. This is the maneno that we have. Okay. 1.2 trillion shillings went to the China Road and Bridge for a project of 475 billion shillings. Baada ya kulipa 475 billion, tulilipa 1.2 trillion kwa sababu Kenya ililipa China Road and Bridge extra 644 billion. Hiyo ndio kitu ambayo sasa tunajiuliza, kwani nini ilifanyika? Kwani what happened? Ndio tunajiuliza, kwani nini iliendelea? Ni maneno gani inaendelea sai? Ndio sasa unaona Jimmy Wanjigi anasema, ni nini kilifanyika? Ni nini ambayo wanachuficha hawa watu? What are they hiding from us, guys? What are they hiding from us? Kama hawatufichi, basi watuonyeshe hizo records. Watuonyeshe, they show us those records. Now I'm speaking in a bit of Swahili because I need to reach out to people. Okay? Ninaongea Kiswahili kidogo ndio watu wengine wa understand kwamba tulikuwa na hii loan ya 475 billion shillings. Lakini Kenya iliendelea kulipa 644 billion shillings. Na bado tuko na hiyo loan ambayo tumepewa. Lakini sisi kwa sababu sisi ni wa Kenya hatuna pesa mingi, tuliambiwa tulipe 10%. Tulipe 47.5 billion. Hiyo ndio inakuanga 10% of 475 billion. 47.5 billion ni 10% ya 475 billion. Hata wewe ukienda bank wanakuambia kama unataka loan ya 100,000 tuseme, wewe lipa 10%. Wewe utalipa 10,000 alafu benki ikupatie 90,000. Lakini ni kama mtu alienda bank akasema nataka loan ya 100,000. Akaambiwa wewe lipa 10,000 alafu tutakupatia hiyo 90,000 alafu ulipe pole pole. Lakini huyo mtu akadecide, nitatoa hata 200,000, nitalipa 200,000, niweke hapo kwa bank alafu pia munipatie hii ingine ya 90. Hata unipatie hii ingine ya 100. Sasa unajiuliza, sasa ni nini inaendelea? It doesn't make any sense. You see, it doesn't make sense. Ndio naona Jimmy Wanjigi anatuambia, tuwe waangalifu sana na tujue vile kunatendeka. Because hii ni nchi yetu na ni lazima tujue. Sisi kama wananchi wa Kenya. Na poleni sana kwa hii Kiswahili yangu ya kuomba maji. So all of that I'm saying to people is, it's as if somebody went to the bank and said, give me a loan of $100,000. And the bank tells you, no, okay, that's no problem. You just pay 10%, take $10,000, pay $10,000, we'll give you $90,000, your balance. And you decide, no, I think I'm very rich. I'm going to actually pay the bank 200,000. And then you go to the bank and get 90. Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. But this is what Kenya did. Kenya paid $644 billion. Okay? And still took a loan of $475 billion. Putting Kenya in debt of 1.2 trillion. Here we are, guys. We are in big trouble. So what they're saying is that because we paid all this extra money to the China Exim Bank, what the bank did, what China did, they said, you know what, we are just going to do a little project for Kenya. We're going to build an expressway, the expressway that we all love so much that, I'll show you a picture of it here, I rode the expressway and I find it absolutely beautiful, but it costs 100 billion. So 100 billion out of 644, or let's say 700 billion shillings is nothing. You're still left with money. So it's a kind of way to kind of deflect our eyes from what's going on. Yeah. So this issue. There was an issue that was flagged, by the way, and this is what Jimmy Wanjigi is calling the odious debt. Hii ndio Jimmy Wanjigi anaita odious debt au debt ambayo sio yetu, lakini ni lazima tuilipe. Anasema kwamba between Eurobond na SGR tuko na debt kubwa sana, debt kubwa sana. Anasema sisi sasa tumekuwa kama wa slaves. We've become slaves. You know, we're being enslaved by this debt.
Did they receive the self-raising finance
from the National Treasury?
National Treasury? Yes, they did.
And
what were the sums?
And some.
And some.
Yeah.
So we just did the numbers. Now, if you want us to cross audit, right? That is an exercise for the Auditor General. That's an exercise for COB. That should have been their job. What we have are the claims for the project,
and
the
payments.
certificates, and the payments.
So total payments were 1.2 trillion.
Almost 1.2 trillion that went to China Road and Bridge for a project of 475 billion. Now, what you need to understand
is that we paid more from our pockets than China Exim Bank paid.
Now you got it. We, Kenyans, with our taxes, financed that entire project and more. We did not even need a loan. That's the way you need to digest this.
Pana, no.
That's what you need to digest.
Pana, no.
Give us a minute.
we have to go back to this story.
Meanwhile, the controller of budget, guys, if you remember the controller of budget, what she said, controller of budget and the auditor general have raised the flag, okay, but came on board and also complained about the fact that there are some monies that actually go to National Treasury that do not come to the Consolidated Fund or the Exchequer. And that is actually against the Constitution. And that makes budgeting an unconstitutional process. Constitution imesema ni lazima pesa zote ambazo zinaingia Kenya ziingie hii account ambayo inaitwa Consolidated Fund. Hapo ndio sasa mtu kama controller wa budget na auditor general wanazalipia development zile maendeleo, zile mradi na zile development ambazo zimekuwa planned na government ya Kenya. Lakini zikienda pahali kama treasury, huyo sasa controller wa budget hawezi ingia mambo ya treasury. Treasury lazima kama ingepata hiyo pesa iweke huko kwa exchequer account. So here I am trying to speak it in two languages. So if anybody wants to come and interpret for me, I'll be very happy. Yes. So this is the problem with the SGR. Okay. Na hii kitu is making us poor. This is why the Kenya shilling is coming down. This is why we are wondering what is happening with our money. Nini inafanyika? Because the government is raising tax so that it can afford to pay. So, Gava ina borrow 644 billion shillings extra. Na at the same time, bado tuko na hii loan ya 475. Alafu wanatuongezea mataxes. Ndio tulipe hiyo 644 billion shillings. So the thing is, already vile ameona ni kwamba already Kenya imeshalipa hiyo 475 billion SGR already imeshalipwa. Na kama ingekuwa hiyo waongeze hiyo 644, ndio Jimmy anasema kwamba hii railway ingeenda mpaka Malaba. So if we had added the 644 billion shillings, it means that actually we would have extended this railway all the way to Uganda. But that money kind of got lost in all these transactions. There are too many people, too many steps, too many offices. Yeah, too many departments. So he says that himself, Jimmy Wanjigi was saying himself as a businessman, it's impossible to do business because of the high taxes.
This is just simple math. People are not doing math here. We have a big problem. Simple math. And you're asking why we have problems. You're asking why we have problems. We are saying conservatively, over 700 billion shillings has been put in somebody's pocket. You see this expressway? It cost about 100 billion shillings.
Yeah, should have been 8.
When I look at it, right, because it's a PPP by China Road and Bridge,
Yeah.
guaranteed by Kenyans.
Yes.
That is just money laundering of our money.
How?
But if you have been paid over 700 billion above your cost,
You need to bring it back.
you just bring
into
it
the
back to
system.
wash it. Now, this, you see, unless you understand the concept of all this as a massive crime scene of monies that are unimaginable to most of us, okay, you will not get to the crux of this problem. You're also, as the media's responsibility in this. We can blame Parliament. The Kenyan public choose those parliamentarians, so they should blame themselves, not the parliamentarians. We elect a president. We should blame ourselves because he didn't do his homework and he's telling us now he can't meet his promises. We have constitutional office holder called the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget. The Controller of Budget I watched last week before the dialogue committee in Yakango is somebody who is crying for help. You could see she's crying for help. She's singing. I mean, who knows how many offices she has not sung in? Who knows who is not visiting her office and telling her, you know, you better just sign this thing.
She's telling
This thing may sweep you long before you do whatever. She is crying for help, even media help, and you don't get it. The only thing you get out of all she said was she's talking about her salary being twice, because maybe that's all you understand. Her salary being posted twice. That is not the problem. It's nothing. The big problem is what she said. We are Fulizaing to go and drink at the bar. You know, she's crying for help. And even the media is not listening. So I think we all need, as Kenyans, to take responsibility. Right? We can't shove it to one side or the other. We must take responsibility because this pain is going to continue. It is not ending. And let me give it graphically, because this is another figure I would have liked to have brought up earlier. Graphically to our lives going forward. Because of so much money going to debt. Every time our exchange rate is dropping, the same COB has said 1 shilling increases debt by 40 billion shillings. Drop. A shilling drop. 40 billion. That is never going to end. Where is our shilling dropping? Where is all our money going?
So why is it dropping?
Where is all our money going?
To paying debt?
Yes.
It is.
We're not producing.
Well, at 70%,
Yes.
in terms of everything
We're
you
not
get,
producing.
70% goes towards the payment of debt.
Correct. If we do not address this massive theft, this crime scene called the treasury, I can assure you there's no amount of taxes, there's no amount of beating us on our heads that is going to solve this. There's no stabilization, because I hear the government say, we have stabilized. They've stabilized nothing. Look at the exchange rate. Look at cost of living. There's nothing stable here. Look at debt. They're taking more debt. If they were stable, why would they be taking double the debt that Uhuru even took last year? Right. They've not stabilized anything. I am a businessman. A businessman, right, does not operate on the basis of theft. That's criminality. Right? So you look at return. I had done a project that was pure business. Right? We are investing. I'm not taking tax revenue.